There is a woman in your life that eats your glory at night. Eliminate her or perish. In the hustling and bustling town of Lagos, Nigeria, where people never really go to sleep, there lived a man named Joseph. Joseph was widely known in the area where he lived. He was a respected husband and a father of 3. Joseph was 42 years, and very decent man by all standards. He works as an account officer in a local government office. He was married to Grace. Grace was a nurse who worked at a small clinic. Her salary was very little, but she was very supportive. Grace was the kind of woman who made sacrifice look easy. They had 3 children. They lived in a modest home. They were barely surviving, but they had so much love in the family. 3 years after the birth of their third child, things began to crumble. Joseph was fired from the office he had worked for 15 years for no valid reason. Things went from bad to worse. They could barely feed. Grace's earnings were not enough to carry a family of 5. The kids stopped going to school because of lack of funds. They couldn't even afford to pay their rent anymore, and the landlord never failed to seize every opportunity to threaten them. Joseph would go out every day looking for a job to take care of his family. But all he got each time was the promise of getting back to him, but they never did. Joseph started going to construction sites to carry blocks and sand on his head, just so he could feed his family. He always came back exhausted with the little wages he got from there. Every night he would cry silently. He was not happy with everything going on in his life. He would tell his wife Grace, "Please, I'm sorry, this is not the life I planned for you," he would say, breaking into sobs. But just like her name, Grace had so much grace to calm the storm in her heart. Each time, Grace would comfort him and pray with him. She would assure him that things would soon get better. But it only got worse. The financial burden took a toll on Joseph and he became critically ill. Joseph was now not only broke, but he was also weak, sick and confused. But his wife Grace stayed with him through it all. One evening, in the peak of his despair, Joseph made up his mind to visit Prophet Ezekiel of Fire for Fire Ministries. Prophet Ezekiel was a popular name in Ikorodu, Lagos, where Joseph and his wife lived at the time. He was famously known for his dramatic deliverance sessions and his ability to give prophecies. He came to the church at about 4 p.m. in the evening, but was kept waiting until 6 p.m. The receptionist claimed the prophet was in a deliverance session with a member. After 2 hours of painful waiting, Joseph was called in to meet the prophet. Joseph came in, greeted and explained all his failures to the prophet. The prophet looked at him deeply and sighed like a man in distress, and said to him, "Brother Joseph," his voice shaking like thunder, "all you mention now is not ordinary." He asked if Joseph was married, and Joseph confirmed his marriage to Grace. Then the prophet continued. "Brother Joseph," he began, "I see a woman in your life. This woman eats your glory at night." Joseph's eyes widened. "She is very peaceful on the surface, but she is your downfall." He continued. "She is your closest confidant but also your greatest enemy." Then he looked at him straight in the eye and said with a note of finality, "She sleeps on the same bed with you." Joseph blinked. "Grace, how can it be?" "No." "Prophet, check again." Joseph said, "That woman has been my anchor. She does everything within her power to make this marriage work. In fact, she just sold her last jewelry this morning to feed the family." But the prophet looked at him, this time pissed and angry, and shouted at Joseph, "Nonsense. Are you calling me a liar? I don't say things I'm not shown. Until she is out of your life, light will never return. God showed me clearly. Eliminate her or perish. If you know you aren't ready, please leave here. I don't do things with people who doubt." The prophet thundered. Joseph stood up and left in anger mixed with fear. That night Joseph couldn't sleep. The prophet's words kept echoing in his head, "Eliminate her or perish. Grace. No. Never, she can never be my problem. God, what is happening? I can't believe this." But then, Joseph started watching his wife closely. Every word she said now felt like manipulation. He read meaning to everything she did, and took every joke that once made him laugh seriously. Joseph started paying attention to details. Sometimes he would refuse her food, claiming he was fasting. Grace noticed him growing distant. He no longer prayed with her. No longer called her my Grace, as he used to. And one night, when she asked what was wrong, he gave her a thunderous slap on her cheek. No explanations, just bitterness. Grace was shocked beyond words. He had never done that before. She cried bitterly. Joseph was remorseful. Later that evening, he apologized to his wife. He said he was overwhelmed and frustrated. That was why he acted that way. Grace forgave her husband and assured him of a better tomorrow, and for some days things appeared to be normal again. But one day Grace came home joyfully. She had just secured a new job in a tertiary hospital. She broke the news to Joseph. That same day, Joseph was just coming from a construction site where he went to carry sand as usual. He had a fight with the site supervisor who refused to pay him his complete wages after the day's work. After which he left in a bad mood. This means Joseph could not return to the site tomorrow. And here was Grace, his beloved wife, announcing her new job at a well-paid hospital, while he has been reduced to just a mason. Instead of rejoicing with her, Joseph gave his wife a cold look and walked past she and the children to the room. He started thinking about what Prophet Ezekiel had said. The next day swallowed his pride and went to the site where he fought the previous day. But they drove him away. This made Joseph more bitter. And worse now, he was idle. 2 days after, Joseph went back to the prophet. He had already made up his mind to go ahead with what the prophet said. Joseph sat outside the church compound for almost an hour, watching the flickering candlelight behind the curtains of Prophet Ezekiel's office. His heart pounded like a talking drum. His palms were wet, and his lips dry. But his mind had surrendered. Finally a young boy came to call him. He stood up slowly and entered the small room. Prophet Ezekiel looked up. Smiling faintly, as though he'd been expecting him all along. "You're here," the prophet said calmly, like a father welcoming a prodigal son. Joseph didn't sit. He couldn't. He stood stiff, eyes dull and voice hoarse. "I'm ready," he said. Prophet Ezekiel nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Good. Heaven has waited long enough." Joseph swallowed. "How do I do it?" The prophet stood and walked toward him, his white robe brushing the dusty floor. "She is not an ordinary woman," he said slowly. "You cannot confront her directly. If you do, her spirit will fight back. You must approach her with peace. With love. That's how spirits like hers are deceived." Joseph's mouth hung slightly open. "She must sleep," the prophet continued. "Make her comfortable. Feed her. Lay with her if necessary. Then, when her guard is down, you strike." Joseph's voice trembled. "Strike how?" The prophet's eyes darkened. "You will cut her where her strength lies, the neck, the heart, and the stomach. That's where the covenant was sealed in the realm of the spirit. You must break it." He walked back to his chair and pulled out a folded paper. "This is Psalm 35, he said. "But not the ordinary one. I have mixed it with fire verses. Read it before you begin. And read it again after it is done. And burn all her white clothes. Then cut a piece of her hair and bring it to me. That's how we'll seal the deliverance." Joseph took the paper with a trembling hand. Prophet Ezekiel smiled once more, placing a heavy palm on his shoulder. "Do not be afraid, Joseph. You're not killing your wife. You're setting your soul free," he said. Joseph turned and walked out, the words ringing in his head like a slow chant. "Strike the neck. The heart. The stomach." He didn't see Grace again as his wife from that moment. He only saw her as an enemy. The prophet had convinced him that his deliverance could only come through blood. And he was ready to go any length to gain it. One night after Grace had a long tiring day at the new hospital where she now worked, she returned home to find that her husband sitting on the couch alone with none of the children in sight. "Good evening, my husband," Grace greeted in her usual calm voice. "Where are the children?" she asked. Joseph told her he had taken them to their grandmother's house for the weekend. Since it was their norm to do so once in a while, she didn't think much about it. But her only concern was why didn't he discuss it with her? But she couldn't question him. She didn't want to stir more trouble. After all, they are his children too. She went in changed and took her bath. When she came out, Joseph handed her a plate of indomie. He claimed he made it specially for her. Grace collected it with mixed feeling. Why is he suddenly loving? Well, maybe he is gradually coming back, she thought. Something told her not to eat, but Joseph was her husband, he can't possibly plan to hurt her. So she thanked him for it and ate to her satisfaction. Grace didn't know that her husband, Joseph, had laced it with something to make her sleep deeply. Few minutes later, she went into a deep sleep. Joseph brought out the paper prophet Ezekiel had given him, and read Psalm 35 just as instructed. Then he took a kitchen knife he had prepared earlier and stabbed her 3 times at strategic places Prophet Ezekiel asked him to strike so she won't survive. Grace jerked out of her deep sleep, looked at her husband with her eyes widened. Hot tears rolled down her beautiful cheeks. Why? That was the last word she muttered before breathing her last. Joseph was all shaky. He dropped the knife, staggered backwards and sat beside her body, crying. But then he remembered his reason for eliminating her. He wiped his tears. He believed he had done God's will. Then he took a scissors and shaved a portion of her hair. He started planning how to quietly dispose of her body. He went to the backyard, took their wheelbarrow, stuffed her body in a big sack and put it inside the wheelbarrow, after which he covered it with a curtain. He came out, looked thoroughly at every corner to make sure no one was watching. Then he set off to the nearest river to dispose her of. It was 2:17 a.m. in the still silence of the night, when a vigilante group spotted Joseph dragging a wheelbarrow toward the back of an abandoned farm path behind the primary school. The curtain Joseph had used to cover the sack had now become blood-stained. They called out to him, "Hey! Who goes there?" Joseph froze. When they flashed their torches, they saw Joseph. He was trembling and drenched in the rain. "No, Baba Dorcas, oh, I know I'm well," one of them said. "But, where they go by this time and wetin he carry?" one of them asked. "Wetin you carry for that barrel?" His mouth opened, but no words came. Then they suspected a foul play. They moved closer and noticed the visible fear written all over Joseph. "Oh, Baba Dorcas, no blood I dey see so," one of them said. They removed the covering and brought down the sack. They were all taken aback by the horror they saw. Grace's lifeless body lay there, her neck slashed, eyes open in frozen shock. A blood-soaked scarf tied around her waist. They all screamed. Joseph dropped to his knees in the mud. "Baba Dorcas, wetin Mama Dorcas do you?" one of them, who knew his family very well, said. Tears streaming down his face, "I didn't want to kill her. But Prophet Ezekiel said she was the reason for my suffering." The vigilante leader tore him a slap. "You kill your wife because one man talk say she be your enemy. You no get sense, you dey mad." But Joseph was resolute. "Killing her was for the greater good, don't you understand?" He shouted like a madman. "It was for my liberation. Do you know how long I've been suffering with her?" The vigilante group were shocked beyond words. They arrested him and handed him over to the police. The news spread like wildfire and Nurse Grace's family heard it quickly. Both families couldn't believe it until they saw her body and heard Joseph speak with so much conviction in his voice. "If only you would allow me take her hair to Prophet Ezekiel, I will become a rich man within 2 months. This woman was eating my glory and getting better while I wallow in poverty. Don't you get it?" He kept repeating. Grace's mom fainted and was hospitalized. Even Joseph's parents could not believe their ears. "What came over you, Joseph?" they asked with so much pain in their heart. You took the life of the only woman who believed in you even when your family had given up on you, but Joseph kept trying to convince them like his life depended on it. He was put behind bars awaiting trial in court. But what broke the town most was what happened next. 2 days later, the real twist came. A woman arrived at the station, weeping uncontrollably. It was Prophet Ezekiel's wife. She had heard the news and was troubled deeply. She had lived with Prophet Ezekiel for years and has seen how evil he was. But after the death of Grace, she decided she had had enough. I am Prophet Ezekiel's wife, she started. My husband is not a prophet. He is a manipulator. She said her husband had been using fake prophecies to break homes and extort people. She had kept quiet for years because he always threatened to deal with her if she ever thought of exposing him or running away. But Grace's death broke her silence. She was ready to give her life up to expose him, so that Grace could get justice. Please help me, I married a beast, she cried. Prophet Ezekiel was also arrested and charged to court. Prophet Ezekiel and Joseph were in the same police cell. The prophet blamed Joseph for not being able to carry out a simple job. You used your misfortune to expose my source of wealth, now you have dragged me into your misery. Prophet Ezekiel said in anger. That was when the real pain came for Joseph. All his conviction cleared and he finally saw his foolishness. So all you said was a lie. You wanted to use her hair to enrich yourself, not for my deliverance. And I foolishly believed you. She was my peace, she was all I had. Oh Grace, will your spirit ever forgive me? He kept muttering like a man losing himself. Prophet Ezekiel only hissed and never consoled him. Rather, he insulted him for being dumb. Just 2 weeks after, the judge sentenced both of them to death by hanging. Before his execution, Joseph asked to see his children. He knelt before them and asked for their forgiveness. But they were too little to understand. The children were taken in by her elder sister. The city of Lagos was divided between pity and horror. Joseph didn't only end his wife, he had ended himself too. All because of one wrong move he made by visiting a fake prophet. Beware of blind faith. Not every man in white is from God. Sometimes, the devil wears the mask of prophecy and enters through the gate of desperation. Before you act, ask question. Before you accuse, make sure you discern. And never lift a hand against the one who you once loved. The worst you could do is to walk away. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more stories.